Is this an R-rated?
Yeah, not good.
Jim likes Jim a lot, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is kind of true. I mean, no one wants to buy a roof.
I say that all the time.
You're listening to the Roofing Success Podcast, a show created to inspire roofing contractors to achieve optimal success in their roofing businesses. I'm the host, Jim Aline, the co-author of the books Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors and The Best Known Roofer. I'm also the co-founder of Roofer Marketers, the leading digital marketing agency for the roofing industry. On each episode, I sit down with industry leaders to talk about their processes, the lessons they've learned, and how to find success in roofing. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Look for the buttons. Take a look at your screen, not if you're driving. Take a look at your screen, press the review, comment button, like button, subscribe button. If there's any of those buttons there that you see, do that. Leave us a review. My phone number is in the description. So I'd love to hear from you. Love to get some feedback on the shows. If there's anyone you want to see on or anything that you'd like being talked about, shoot a text, man. Send it over. Today, we have Corey Combs with us, South Shore Roofing and Exteriors.
Yeah.
It's been a long time coming. I don't know why we haven't had these conversations already on this show, man. But great to have you.
Thanks. I appreciate it, man. It's good to be here, and I appreciate you inviting me to come on your podcast.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So Corey, how did you find your way into the roofing industry?
Is this a G-rated show? Is this an R-rated? What do you?
It's for roofers. So.
I dropped out of high school, and I was working at a restaurant with a couple guys that one of them, his dad or his father-in-law rather, owned a roofing company, and we got kind of tired of not making a ton of money. And so he came to me one day and he's like, hey, we can make double what we make here. And I think at the time we were making like $8 an hour or something, Yeah. And so I got into, the first was tearing off tar and gravel roofs. That was the first job in Florida. In
Florida.
Yeah. So, pitch and gravel roofs, built up roofs. That was kind of like my first foray into roofing, and then got into doing production work. They had picked up a bunch of accounts for new home builders. So we were doing drying in the roofs, putting the flashings and valley metals, getting them ready for the shinglers. And then inevitably I learned how to shingle and do flat roofs and all that stuff. And so after a couple of years, I was shingling and doing flat roofs and making decent money. And it was a good industry. I was doing what young dropouts do, was drinking and doing drugs. And so it was a perfect fit. And then, I mean, and you could make decent money. And so I stayed into that. And my parents and my brother started buying a bunch of properties. And so I was the construction guy, even though I didn't know anything else but roofing, and got into flipping houses with them and just kind of learned general construction. And then did that for a while. And then 2008 hit, construction completely died. It was just like somebody turned off a faucet. And I had a friend of mine, the industry was doing promotions and pre-launches for gyms. And I know Alex Hormozy's made that kind of famous with gym launch and all that. But I got into that industry, and that's where I learned marketing, the fundamentals and principles of marketing. We did telemarketing, we did guerrilla marketing, we did direct mail. And so we did a lot of types of marketing to bring people into the gym. And then we had to teach the people that worked at the gym how to sell the memberships. So that's where I learned objection handling. That's where I learned how to get in front of the objections, using the gym as sort of a presentation. So I really learned the fundamentals of sales. And then I got into where I was training their sales teams. And so I did, I had a lot of experience on the sales and marketing side, and then got back into construction and took all of that stuff with me. And that's kind of where I learned how to be really good at home service sales. And so that's what I did. And, I was selling $2 million a year before it was cool. So, yeah. And so that was kind of my path. And then the company I worked for, I had an architect. She and I worked really closely together. And she asked me one day, it's like, why are you working here? Why don't you go out on your own? She's like, the industry, you're really good at what you do, roofing, construction, all of that. You should go out on your own. And so after about a year of her prodding me, I said, you know what, I'm going to do that. And I did. And so I started South Shore, and here we are.
What year was that?
I started South Shore 2018, and then 2019 was kind of our first year that we actually started operating.
Yep. That's awesome. I've also done those gym sales, and the presentation of the gym tour, right? Like, you think the consumer thinks they're going on a tour, but really that's your sales presentation, right? Like, there's a lot to be learned. One of the things I learned about gym sales is, man, that is a grind. Like, that is, like, when you talk about like used car sales or one of those things, boy, gym sales is like the retention rate on customers is not very high. I bet a lot of you listening right now maybe have gym memberships that you're not using to their fullest potential, we'll say, right? Like, and so you're looking for a way out of that contract. And that's, that is definitely a way to learn sales. It's a great way to learn sales, honestly, right?
Yeah.
You have to get people in. So you're learning marketing. You have a sales presentation that you're perfecting, and it really is the same presentation over and over again. It doesn't feel like that to the customer, right? But boy, it's the same presentation over and over again. Let's start there. Let's start with some of those lessons like that you were able to carry over into roofing. Like, how did you get people in the door that correlates to how you get people, to South Shore now?
We did a lot of, what you would consider guerrilla marketing. So we would set up a tent in the parking lot of a hotel or a grocery store or whatever, where there was a lot of foot traffic. And we would just get people, we would give them a free offer, right? Like, hey, we'll give you a free 2 or 3 week membership. Come on in, visit the gym. And so we gave out a lot of them, and you would be surprised. I mean, a lot of people would take advantage of that. This was, I think, 2008. So telemarketing was still a thing. And we would just blitz the gym. And we'd have 4 or 5 sales guys there, and we would have them just, as soon as one person's done, the next. And we got to the point where we were taking like groups, because we got so busy and we had to take groups on the tour and try to sell all of them. So how that correlates to the sales and what I do now is I really learned that you have to make an offer that people are attracted to, right? And so it has to be low barrier, it has to be low commitment, it has to be easy. So I learned that. And then I learned that whenever you get in front of somebody, it's easier in roofing because we're not like they have a need. We're not trying to create a need, right? So roofing sales was a little bit easier because we're not trying to create that need. What we have to do in roofing sales is we have to take away this price-centric mindset, which everybody has that when you first meet them, because that's how they think about their roof, right? It's always price because they don't have a different way to think about it. And so it's the same way with the gyms and the fitness. Most people didn't think about joining the gym. So we had to get them to think about joining the gym in the same way that we have to get people to think about other things than price when we're selling a roof, right? And so that's kind of how I look at it and how it correlated for me.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the things that stands out to me there that I don't think people will understand, especially if you're in that startup and growth phase, is what you'd mentioned, the guerrilla marketing activities, is the amount of activity that's being done. So there was all of your guerrilla activities. There was telemarketing. There was like, it wasn't just, we're going to sit in the gym and hope someone shows up.
No.
Right. And I think that that's a challenge a lot of times with people starting businesses, that they kind of get in that mindset of, well, someone should call me. And if they don't, now they get into that, into the trap of buying leads. Well, if I buy leads, that'll be the solution. But I think that solution is the excuse for not doing the activity. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. And I think that's one of the reasons I've been able to grow South Shore so much over in such a short period of time, because it's those activities. You have to do all of them. You can't say, look, I'm just going to door knock, or I'm just going to, buy leads, or I'm just going to, use Google. Like you can't do that. You have to do all of it. Yeah. You have to do all of those activities.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes, and I've said this on the podcast plenty of times, is from Jim Rohn, the old business philosopher. He passed away many years ago, but it's, you need 5 to 7 lead sources to create consistent lead flow in your business. Right. And if the 5 to 7 number is right or not, I don't know. But the concept is, you need activity. You need multiple poles in the water. You got a lot of poles behind you there, right? Like you need to have all of them in the water. If you have all of those poles casted out at one point at the same time, you have a greater opportunity to catch a fish, right? Like it's a simple concept, but I think that a lot of people don't understand the work that goes into it, or don't understand the level of activity that's needed. Do you see that? I mean, you're doing some coaching now too, right? So I know that now, is it sales coaching, business coaching? What's the core of the coaching you're doing?
It's both. It's really department structures and how to actually set up your departments for overall success of your company. So it kind of encompasses, the first part is how do you structure your sales department so you can track, train, manage your sales team, and it goes through comp structure, activities for the sales manager. So it's all that stuff, and then it's also sales fundamentals. How to do a inspection from a sales standpoint, how to do a presentation from a sales standpoint, how to close, and all that stuff. That stuff's important too, but you have to have all of it, right? Yeah. You have to have the structure and the process as well as the fundamentals and techniques. And then you have to carry that into your production side and your operations side. So that's what we're really talking about, and really teaching people how to develop out those department structures so that they can be successful and grow and scale. And one of my favorite comments that I've ever heard was from Alex Hermosi, actually. He said, there's no silver bullet. There's just thousands of golden BBs. And I love that, because everybody wants that silver bullet, and there is not a silver bullet.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're trying to teach.
I mean, it's a great analogy, and it's like there's like, from a marketing perspective, I always say it's marketing, not magic. Like, because people are looking for that silver bullet in their marketing. Or, man, if I just get my sales script, like maybe I go to all these sales coaches, and if I get to the right coach and they give me the right sales script, then I'll be able to close. That right? Like that silver bullet of, like if I do, man, it's not it. It's all of it. Right. It's all of it. And it's a continual iteration of everything. Right. It's a continual iteration of everything. It's like, so now we have a high volume of activity, and now we have this offer. What's a good strategy? Because I love where you're going with that, in the taking away of price, right? Like, because that's no one wants to buy a roof.
I say that all the time. That's how I train my team. I'm like, nobody wants to buy a roof. Nobody. That's why the restoration industry is so huge, because they don't want to pay for their roof. They want their insurance company to pay for it. And I'm 100% retail. So we have to work off that presupposition and know that and work around that, because it is a fundamental truth. Yep.
Yeah. And so in that, you're starting off the sales process. What tips and tricks do you use with your sales reps? What are the value propositions that you're making, the offers that you're making to get that price down the line of their thinking? Like that, okay, now price isn't number 1 on our list anymore. It's number 5 on our list. How are you going with that?
I will say it's just really like any sales. The first thing you have to do is it's based on asking the right questions. So understanding your buyer, which we understand that nobody wants to replace their roof. We also understand that when we walk into the situation with the homeowner, the only way they have to think about this is by price, because that's how we shop for everything else. And that's why contractor complaints and contractor conflicts with homeowners is so high, because homeowners don't know how to ask the right questions and contractors don't know how to meet homeowners where they're at. So what we do is we take that and say, okay, we know that nobody wants to buy their roof. We know that they're just going to think about this on price. And so we ask them the right questions. We go out there and the first question we ask is, have you ever done a project like this before? And we want to get a feel for, have they interviewed contractors? Have they bought roofs before? And if they've bought roofs before, our conversation is going to be different than if they haven't. And if they haven't, then we ask them, have you ever hired a contractor for anything? No? Okay. And then we start talking about, what would you like to see from the contractor you hire? And so it's all about talking to them about who they want to hire, what that looks like, and what they want to see from the contractor. And nobody ever says, well, I want the cheapest contractor. Nobody. Money never gets discussed, ever. It's always basic, generic responses. Yeah. And so we dig into those basic, generic responses, and we show them that there's a lot more to think about than just getting these estimates. And so that's really what we start to do is we call it inception. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do the inception and we start planning these things in their head, things for them to think about that have nothing to do with price, that have everything to do with, oh my gosh, I actually need to pay attention to who these people are and who this company is and what they actually do. Right. And then, and so then we leave them with that. And then we set a follow-up presentation with them so we can kind of go through, hit on those keys, the key value propositions that we bring to the table. And it's all based on the answers that they gave us at the measure.
Yeah. What I like about that is that you're asking them, right? Selling is the best salespeople ask the best questions. Mm-hmm. The best CEOs ask the best questions, right? Questions are what lead to growth, right? Like if you want to become self-aware, ask questions of why you procrastinate, what's causing you to not, go to the gym. It's the questions, the better questions that you can ask. I love that you're asking, what does it look like to you? What does working with a good contractor look like to you? Right?
Right.
What do you do when their expectations are way off?
We ask them to tell us about that. I mean, I always, when somebody has some like wild, just kind of out of the, realm of like reality comments, which has not happened very often, yeah. But it's, it's like, tell me about that. I mean, what does that mean to you? How do you envision that happening? Or how do you envision that? Like, if you were going to tell me exactly how this goes down, how do you envision that happening? And I do that a lot too when we have conflicts with homeowners and maybe they've talked to a bunch of other contractors and they haven't paid attention to what we said and they thought something else was going to happen and they're pissed or whatever. That's the same kind of thing that I do is I ask them questions. Hey, listen, what did you envision was going to happen here, or how this was going to go down? And then where did we mess up, and tell us about what we could have done differently, right? So it's the same thing, right? It's just asking the right questions to help them get whatever they really need to get out, and to me, so I can understand how they're thinking about whatever the situation is.
Yeah. I had a conversation this morning about those questions and answers and the objections that come up most frequently, and the conversations that you have most frequently in the sales process. And I believe that those conversations can be brought into your marketing. Is that something that you do as like you're now in my marketing efforts, you can then use that and start to frame the conversation before you even show up?
We definitely do that. And our whole vantage point is we want to be the contractor that's anti-contractor reputation, right? And like the tagline is contracting refined. And that's what we try to do, is we try to go in and have that conversation, that real conversation, like, look, have you had a bad experience with a contractor, or are you sick of contractors you can't trust, or something like that, to begin the conversation on what we know to be true. And part of our presentation addresses that right off the bat. We talk about what happens, why it happens, who it happens to, and what the circumstances are, so that they understand it's like, oh, this isn't really just a financial transaction. There's a lot more that goes into this. Yeah. And I need to pay attention to what the attributes of a quality company look like, so I don't become one of these people that has had a bad experience with a contractor. And so that's really like the whole nuts and bolts of our sales process.
Yeah. And this was a conversation that I had with John Bros a while ago, or it reminds me of our mutual friend, right? Like, I remember him talking about like, yeah, these are like, there are certain things that you as a homeowner should know about hiring a contractor. And you should, these are the bare minimums, right? Like that you should work off of. But then there's these other things that if you hire a contractor that also have these attributes or do these things, now you're really hiring someone well. That's really well suited for you and will do the best job and will be there for the long term, right? That was It's like, because I mean, there's in the consumer's mind, it's commoditized. Like,
right.
What's the difference?
What's the difference, right? And you're in Florida. Everybody's licensed, and all this stuff. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Well, there's a huge difference, and we know there's a huge difference. And the other presupposition that we operate off when we talk to and train our sales team is that homeowners don't even know what they don't know, right? And so it. But what is really complex about the situation is you can't just go tell them. And I have a family picnic analogy. So the family picnic analogy goes like this. Okay. So you're sitting down at a family picnic and you're eating dinner, and your third cousin, Jim, who you've never met, excuse the name, but I'm sorry. I always use Jim. Right. So your third cousin, Jim, comes over and he sits down, and he just starts talking about himself, and he talks the entire time you're eating, just talks about himself. Then he gets up and leaves, and your mom comes over and says, "Hey, what'd you think of Jim? What do you think your opinion of Jim's going to be?"
Yeah, not good.
Jim likes Jim a lot, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is kind of true. I mean, I could be that third cousin. I might, No.
Yeah. But the overreaching point is, but if you play the scenario where Jim sits down and Jim's asking you about what you're into and what you like to do and about your life, and you guys have a good mutual back and forth conversation, you're going to like Jim a lot more.
Yeah.
And so that's like the big killer over the years that I've seen people come in and they want to talk about how great they are.
Yeah.
And the homeowner's like,
yeah.
Okay.
Don't be Jim. Cool. Be Pete. I have a cousin, Pete Corey. He lives in the Cleveland area. And every family,
Okay.
I only see him most of the time at family events and family functions every few years. You have a conversation with him, he only wants to know about you. And those are the conversations that people like to have the most, right? Are the ones about themselves.
Sure.
So be like Pete.
Dude, everybody likes to
Be like Pete.
everybody likes to talk about
Don't
themselves.
be like Jim. Be like Pete.
And that's it. And so, that's a fundamental principle that
Yeah.
you've got to teach your team too. You cannot, we call it, word vomit or going and puking on people. We have some, maybe not the most PG, analogies for word vomit, but it's true. So, that's why we talk about it's a fact finding mission. So you're not there to sell anything. You're just on a fact finding mission, and that's it, right? How do we sell these folks?
What if you find out they're not your perfect customer in that fact finding mission?
That's part of it. That's part of it too. And so when you start asking these questions and you figure out, are we going to be able to build some value here?
Yeah.
Because if it comes down like just to price, we're not going to be able to compete most of the time. And so how do we figure that out? And how do we meet that person where they are and say, look, we might not be your customer.
Yeah.
I mean, we're your contractor, right?
Yeah. Like we might not be it. And these are the reasons why we have integrity. I was talking to a contractor recently. He was approached at an event that he was at, and someone came up to him and said, I have the materials, I have the crew, I just need you to pull a permit.
Pass. Hard pass.
Hard pass. Or that would be $25,000.
Right. Yeah. You give them like, I don't really want to do this number, right? Yeah.
It's crazy though, but that person's expectations, right? That I had another. I was in that conversation. I was talking about a client that we had many years ago, whose company name was XYZ Discount Roofing, not XYZ, but I won't put the name out there. And they were wondering why they got only people that were like so low end price shopping, and why people called them to buy materials. And I was like, well, you're not saying roofing contractor, it's roofing, discount roofing. So people think, oh, materials, and then it's discount. So the person that you're attracting wants a discount, so be careful in your marketing, be careful in your conversations with people. You may get the people that you don't want. Now. Go for it.
You go.
No, go for it.
No, I was going to say, we train. I train my team on. So there's four fundamental pillars of how we need to think about sales, and it's the 4 buying frames and knowing how people make decisions. And so there's four thinking frames that people use to make decisions, and specifically buying decisions. One of them is is opportunity cost. What do you have to give up, or what do you have to gain? The fear of loss, the experience frame, and then the compare and contrast frame. So you have to hit on all 4 of those things, and you have to understand that's how people buy. And so those are the pillars on what we've built, or what I've built my sales process off of, is knowing that's how people make decisions. And there's a lot of pieces and parts to that, but that's the way that you get people to buy from you, is understanding that you need to hit those things so that they can actually make a decision. So that's the other thing as well. It's not just about being able to close. It's about giving them all the information they need in a way that's meaningful to them so they can make a decision and go with you.
Yeah, making sure that they have the information to make the buying decision. If they are missing information, they're not able to make that buying decision, or it will be a bad buying decision potentially.
Yeah.
Now, I say this a lot. The contractors that I know that are most successful turn one into many, right? So signed contract is great on that one, but the fulfillment of your services, right? The through creating raving fans, building that roof for them is going to, there's a lot going on there, right? How do you then take that person, you've found that they are the right customer for you, you're the right contractor for them, get that contract signed. What do you do from there that to ensure that they turn into a raving fan?
I'm glad you're asking this, because that's another thing that's been really frustrating for me in the industry, and another reason why I've tried to get into doing some of this coaching and consulting, because everybody's front loaded on sales and marketing. And we forget, like, what's actually the main thing is the fulfillment of our services. How do we actually make money is creating those raving fans, having production processes to where we can seamlessly and effortlessly build the job, give them a great experience, and then create a fan that's going to recommend you and become a referral partner for you. And so I'll tell you, my company's built on the four key pillars: sell, build, collect, retain. And that's how we high level took everything and said, okay, we're going to sell. Everything that has to happen in that sales pillar is what we create our SOPs and everything off of, our processes. Build, right? Because we've got to build the job. So the same thing. And then collect. If you don't build that job well, you're going to have a hard time collecting, right? If you don't build that job well, you're going to have a hard time retaining those clients. And so everything that we do is based on knowing, like, we have to have a good customer journey so they have a great experience all the way through to where they're going to be like, oh yeah, I love you guys, right? I had one of the best compliments I got. There was a newer roofing company contractor that opened up in my area, and he reached out to me on Facebook and was like, hey man, I know this might be a little bit weird, but I'm new in business. I see you everywhere. Would you mind having lunch with me? And I was like, sure, of course, no problem. And we were sitting there talking. He was like, dude, how did you create this cult-like following in these neighborhood groups? Like, every time I ask for a roofer, it's like everyone's like South Shore, South Shore, South Shore, South Shore. And I was like, it was very intentional, very, very intentional. And it was just trying to do our best to give people a great experience that's not the normal, like, oh, we just slapped your roof on, cool, here, grab a check, we'll see you later.
Yep.
Right? It's the little extra things that go in, the attention, the communication, the extra communication, the transparency, like all of those things that really go into creating a good experience for your customer.
I love that. I always ask contractors, well, who refers you? Because they always want referrals. Like, everyone wants referrals. I just want more referrals. Like, or I only work off of referrals. And who refers you? It's people that you've done good work for and created a good experience for. That's who refers you. So sometimes you have to buy more people through your marketing efforts. You have to buy more people that you can then serve at a high level. And then they turn into those raving fans who refer you over and over again. All right, I want to go through this: sell, build, collect, retain. I think this is perfect. So we've gone through sell pretty well, I think. The build process and the communication process. I like to say, if your customers are wondering, you're losing.
1,000,000%. When we do our company meetings, I always say, I'd rather have a complaint that we pestered the shit out of somebody rather than didn't communicate with them, right? That is such an easy thing to fix. It's almost criminal if you don't. And that will solve 95% of your problems. Just communication with your customers, internal communication, just communication, period. So
what are the key communication points that you see to the customer? And what are some of the key communication points through your team?
The key communication points that I see for the customer is when Even in the sales process, before a rep even goes out, we send out communication with them so they get to know us as a company before they even meet us, right? So we're trying to warm up the lead and all of that, establish we're a different type of company. And then we've got to carry that through with the communication from our sales team. We make sure that they always follow up. They stay on top of making sure that all of the paperwork and color selections and all that stuff is done. And then once we hand that off to production, instead of just throwing them on the schedule, we actually reach out to them via text message and email and say, hey, your job's in production. We're working on scheduling. You will notify you once it's been scheduled. Once we get it on the calendar, then we notify them of, well, your project is scheduled for XYZ. If you don't hear from us, here is your contact that will be managing your project. Feel free to reach out to them. It will not be your sales rep. They can and will answer your questions, but for faster service, reach out to your PSM. And so that's how we do that. And then we just let them know 24 hours before we're going to start, we'll be there tomorrow, have your check ready, etc. And then we have somebody assigned to their project who is responsible. So we call them project success managers. Their entire job is to make sure that that project is successful, which means communication with the crew, communication with the homeowner, and then communication with the production manager so that we know what's going on during that job. And that's pretty much, we just, I guess to make a fine point on this is there's always somebody that's responsible and accountable for that communication to the homeowner, so that if it doesn't happen, we can go back and say, hey, you dropped the ball, because we know exactly where it happened, and we can coach them on making sure it doesn't happen again.
Who is accountable? Like, people listening should take note of that. Like, who owns it at different phases of the journey, right? Another thing that I love that you said that I don't want people to miss is, here is who you need to contact. If you are getting phone calls to your business of, hey, I'm not sure who to talk to about this, this is a gap that you need to fill immediately. Right. Like, and I think it happens often in a lot of businesses, you know, and am I supposed to be calling this person? Who am I supposed to be talking to? And if a customer is wondering who their point of contact is,
yeah, that sucks.
That's the most basic level, right? Like, that is the most basic level. That is an extreme lack of communication to that homeowner.
It still happens from time to time. But I think that the way that we've been able to be really diligent with it is we color coded all of our work stages in our CRM. Mm-hmm. So we know who's responsible in that work stage for the communication. So if on the front end, if they're in the lead stage, we know that the admin's responsible for communication. If they're in appointment, estimate, or follow-up, we know that the salesperson that's assigned to them is responsible. Once they go to purple, which is material and pre-production, we know that the production assistant is responsible. And if the job's being built, it's in production, we know it's the PSM. And then after the job is done, we know it's our finance admin, because that's closing out the job, making sure it's paid, all that. So we know who's responsible for the communication depending on where they are in the workflow. I
think I'm going to change my quote. If your customer is wondering, you're losing. Like, I think I'm going to add to that. If your team is wondering who's responsible, you're also losing, right? Like,
well, it's dual purpose. Yeah. It's dual purpose because you know who's responsible to contact the customer, but you know that also if there's something going on, it's that person's responsibility to run that up the flagpole or whatever they need to do to get that solved. It's the accountability piece that was it took a little while to figure that out, but we got it nailed down pretty good.
That's awesome. All right. So now
Yep.
now we know that. Now let's talk about collect, because if you're not collecting the money, you're not in business, right? We could talk about your signed contracts, but how much is actually coming through? What are some strategies that you use to make sure that you receive the revenue that's on the contract that was signed by up in the earlier stages?
I went back and forth on this for a while, trying to figure out how to collect the money. And it comes down to two things. The first thing is just making sure that you give the homeowner absolutely no reason not to pay you, which means you've done a good job, you've communicated, and then our PSMs are directed to do the walkthrough once the job's complete with the homeowner within 48 hours. So if job's done within 2 days, they have a walkthrough scheduled, they go, they make sure everything's good to go with the homeowner. If there's any corrections, punch outs, anything that needs to be done, they handle it, they get it taken care of right then and there. They pick up a substantial completion payment. So we don't let people do like, oh, I'm not going to pay you the $20,000 because there's a piece of, tar on my wall, right? It's like, okay, give us $18,000, hold two, and then give us the other two when we're done, whatever. So, and then the other thing is create incentives for your team so that they have a little bit of an incentive to collect your money for you. They get their beak wet a little bit, so to speak, when they collect a payment. So they're going to be a little bit more diligent in trying to collect your checks when they get a little piece of it.
That's interesting. Get that buy-in, right? To get that buy-in from the team, because if they don't have buy-in on that, it's like, I'll send that email today, maybe. But if you have the buy-in, then there's purpose. There's an incentivizing. What is it? Focus. Incentivize what you want, right? So and collecting that money is incentivizing. In that process, what do you have a process? Since you're full retail, do you have a process in place for someone who doesn't pay or doesn't want to pay?
Yeah, we had a few. We had a few in 23, and the process is we send them a notice of intent to lien. If they don't pay, then we file a lien, and if they still don't pay, we file a lawsuit to foreclose on their property. I mean, that's really all you can do.
I knew we were kindred spirits, because this is so mechanics lien laws for people that if you don't understand, you're filing a mechanics lien. Is that what it is in Florida? Mechanics lien? It's
very similar. They don't call it that.
So, yeah, whatever the verbiage is in your area, I understand them from a mechanics lien perspective, or the verbiage of mechanics lien.
Yep.
So, if you are owed money and you do work, you have to, there are very, very strict and specific timelines around the filing of these, the serving of people,
Yep.
And they are extremely strict, at least in the jurisdictions that I've had to file these in, around the details of the filing. So I don't know how it is where you are also, but like I have seen mechanics liens thrown out because the contractor put a dollar amount that wasn't the exact right dollar amount.
Yeah.
And then they were past the time period to file the correct version.
That's the big one. And then there's sequencing that you have to follow as well. So you have to do, in Florida, you have to do what's called an NOC, which is a notice of commencement. You have to have that filed with the clerk of court. Then so whatever jurisdiction you're working in, whatever that county or municipality is, you file that with the clerk of court. And then you have, so you have 90 days from substantial completion to file a lien, which means you have to do your notice to owner and then file the lien within that 90 days. So we use kind of like a 45 70-day. That's our time, kind of our timelines, where at 45 days they don't pay, we file, we send out that notice to owner, notice of intent to lien. And then then if they don't pay, then we file and record the lien.
Yeah. I've had this conversation get pushed back on me around, yeah, man, but if I bring that up, I don't want them to be mad and not pay me or something like that, right? There's this weird thing about having money conversations for people. I think people are afraid to have money conversations. And
we talk a lot about this. Yes.
What I think, having that structure and knowing the law and knowing the framework and what needs to be filed by when and how and what helps with that conversation. I think you can tell a homeowner, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, look, to protect ourselves, this is the process. We have to file this. I know you, of course, have all of the intentions of paying us, but we just have to file this because it's the timeline that we need to follow within the state laws or the county laws or the whatever jurisdiction you're in, right? And so you can kind of downplay it, but boy, I'm getting that lien, and we will foreclose on that.
I'm glad you brought up the money conversation piece, and it's my entire career, and I even used to feel really weird, if I was working on somebody's property and I had to write a change order. I'm like, man, I just really don't want to go to these people for more money. But I did a training. I went to the International Builders Show in 2011 or something, and I did a training with a guy who he basically said, look, your ability to write a change order is directly related to how well you set expectations with the homeowner up front. And he's like, listen, you have made an agreement to do work, and they've made an agreement to pay you. You guys have a mutually beneficial agreement. If they don't pay you and you've held your part, why is it a problem to demand your money? You did your part. They're in breach, not you. Yeah. And I was like, yes.
One of my real estate attorneys that I used years ago, and because when I was doing a lot of work in real estate, fix and flips and rehabs and things like that, he was like, "What we had a disagree." I was in the middle of a dispute with a contractor, and so we were in mediation, and he said, "Do you know why they call them contractors?" I was like, "I don't know why." He's like, "Because they work off of contracts."
Yes.
It's that simple. Like, these are the things that we are going to do. If these items are completed, this is what you owe me. This is the contract. Like, it's very simple. It can be very simple, right? Like, if you think about it that way, you owe me money. So hopefully that doesn't happen to people too often, right? You want the people that, and if you set proper expectations and you do good work, you're probably going to run into that less on that collection side. Now you've collected your money. The fourth thing you mentioned was retain. Let's talk about retaining customers. What can you do? Because first, people don't want to buy a roof. They probably don't want to buy another one. So the retention piece, how are you thinking about that? And what are you doing to get them to, I guess, the retention, maybe more in the referral aspect, I'm thinking. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. I'll get to that in one quick second. I just want to say one more quick thing about the collect piece.
Yeah.
And the contract piece. If you're a contractor, whether you're a roofer, you're a remodeler, you're a landscaper, it does not matter. Your work scope and those items in your work scope are directly tied to the contract total. And you need to understand that the contract total has everything to do with your work scope. And if you don't clearly articulate that to your customer. And that's where we talk about setting up the right expectations. They know what they're buying, they know what they're paying for, and more importantly, they know what they're not buying. And things that are adjacent to whatever your project is, you need to address those with them so that if there is that additional work that needs to be done, you've already had that conversation up front. It's really easy. And so if you don't do something that's in the work scope, you should be able to write a change order for credit to the homeowner. Exactly the way that if you have something that needs to be done, you have to write a change order that is for the work being completed. And that, I think, that's another really big blind spot in the industry that I just find unbelievably perplexing.
Here's one thing I have never heard, and this is crazy. The way you said change order to essentially refund or not include this item, right? Yeah. Like if you include this in the scope of work and then you're like, hey, we don't have to do this. We're going to formally create a change order that states that. And now here's your, like that. A lot of times we're only thinking of change orders in the addition of work, right? Like not in the reduction of scope.
That line item should have it should have an above line labor and material number that you got your total job cost off, right? I mean, your total job cost is the sum parts of all the pieces of the job. I mean, that's really how you have to look at it. Yeah. So the retention side is not just about referrals. It's also about warranty, service, and referrals. So you can lose a customer that you've done a great job for if they have an issue and you're not on top of it and you don't stand behind your work, you don't warranty your work, you don't jump on it as soon as there's an issue. I mean, it's roofing. If you do 4, 5, 6, 700 roofs a year, I'm sorry, you're going to have a leak. It's just the way that it is. Somebody's going to make a mistake. You're going to have a leak, and you need to have a process. You need to have an internal process to make sure that you handle that. And that is like top priority, that those people get handled quickly and, you keep them happy. So that's part of the retention strategy as well. Then you have your referral side, which is, there's so many different ways to do this. You can send them gifts. You can, a year down the road, you can send them a nice card that says, hey, we did your roof last year. Thank you very much. We also do windows, decking, whatever. By the way, we have a referral program. We'll, send you a nice high-end bottle of wine or a $250 gift card, whatever, if you send us referrals. I mean, it's really pretty simple. You just utilize your and leverage your current client base to try to get more, right? Yeah. It's super simple stuff. So I have an insurance agent. She's got a really big insurance agency. She's just a great woman. She reached out to me and said, hey, do you know anybody that does gutters? I said, yeah, we do gutters, of course. Oh, I've got these 3 gutters at my house that I need to have fixed. I said, I'll have somebody there for you tomorrow, right? I'm not going to charge her. I had my gutter guy run over there. I don't know, what's it going to cost me? $800? Yeah. But she runs a big insurance agency. She's going to continue to refer me. She's going to, because and she sent me a message last night. She was like, oh my God, thank you so much, And it was like, that's part of my marketing budget, Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me of that phrase, like, what is it? Something like, don't step over dollars to pick up dimes or something like that. Like people step over dollars to pick up dimes. Like, it's like you're worried so much about what this, but in the scope of things, man, there's a huge, huge benefit to these, especially to relationships like that, where, yes. we're going to make sure things are taken care of. I'm pushing 200 episodes here, interviewing successful roofing contractors, and And the most successful are the ones that will take care of anything, anytime, making sure they take care of. There's been stories told where, and you've probably done it, where it was not your fault. And it was we're going to take care of it anyway, because we're going to make you a customer that will then be happy to refer us to other people. There's, of course there's lines you want to draw there, right? But but that's the way that you have to be focused on the long-term broad vision of your company. Where are you going? You can't just think about this month, this deal, this next job, the next one. What do you think, Corey, is the greatest insight that you could share with our audience that has helped you find success with South Shore?
We're in a service-based business, and it's all about customer service. I mean, yeah, you better be good technically at putting on a roof and all of that. All that stuff's very important, but we're in a service-based business, and you've got to remember that. And your willingness to be able to take care of those things that you were just talking about, when maybe it's not your fault, but you're trying to, just put a gesture of goodwill out there for the homeowner. Your ability to be able to do that is related to your ability to sell your jobs profitably and run a profitable company and be able to have that money there so that when those things come up, you can actually do it. And I think a lot of contractors want to do it. They have the right intentions, but they don't know how to, they're not profitable. They don't know how to sell profitable jobs. And so when something comes down the road, they literally cannot help the homeowner, and it makes them look bad. Right. And so I would say those two things, man, you need to run a profitable business, and you need to run a profitable business, not just for the fact that you need to make money or you want to make money. You've got to be able to service your customers like that and pay for things that sometimes aren't your fault, and you're going to do it anyway. But your goodwill and your attitude and your willingness to do that is going to foster such better relationships with your customers that they will refer you, that they will buy into what you're selling, that they will, create that cult-like following on neighborhood groups, so you can't just be thinking about yourself or the next deal or whatever. You got to really think about hey, how can I make a huge impact on my customers the best way that I can, whatever that looks like. And so that's, I think, would be my advice to newer companies.
Awesome, man. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. If you would like to generate more revenue through your digital marketing efforts, please visit roofermarketers.com to get a copy of the book, The Best Known Roofer. Also, check the training section of the website for guides on everything from running effective pay-per-click ads to how to properly set up your Google My Business listing. Thanks for listening.